Hello there, welcome back to Patreon and my next 10-minute tutorial where I'm going to show you a quick and easy technique here in Photoshop that you can use in your own workflow. We're going to talk about the expansion method or expanding your frame, or you may have heard it as the Brenizer method. Essentially what we're going to do is we are going to give ourselves more space to work in our photo. If you're like me, you might like to shoot your photos using a prime lens. I like to use 50mm, 35mm, or 85mm lens. I like the soft focus that it has. I like the really nice soft foreground and background using those lenses gives me, but the downside of that is that it creates a really tightly cropped image because there's no ability to zoom in or out. So we end up with just a singular image that ends up feeling quite cramped. Now, if I was to use just the single image in a photo, in a composite, it might feel a little bit tight. It might not have a lot of space for the viewer to take in the story or image that I'm trying to tell. So we might need to expand our frame, and that's what we're going to learn how to do in this tutorial. I'm going to show you 3 different ways that we can expand our frame. The first is going to be using Adobe Bridge. Now, you might already use Adobe Bridge, maybe you don't have it. It's part of your photography bundle from Adobe, and you can download that from your Creative Cloud subscription. I recommend downloading it to sort your files, to label your files, to name your files. I use it probably in the most inefficient ways, but it works for me. But you can also use it for Photoshop as well. So you can see I've selected all the photos from this little set here, and I'm going to just simply select all of those photos, and then we can go up into Tools, Photoshop, Photo Merge, and what Photoshop is going to do is it's going to compile all those files into a single image. So it's going to take all the information from those files and it's going to start working at putting them together, which is exactly what we want to do. We want to expand our frame so we have more space to work in. So we end up with this window that pops up, this photo merge window. And on the left, you'll see all different layouts that we can use here. I usually stick to one of 2 of them, auto or collage down at the bottom. Auto works kind of about 70% of the time. Sometimes it stretches the sky or the ground. It has a hard time with lines or with trees or with people. Sometimes it cuts off limbs or makes people look a little bit distorted. So it's not always the best choice. Even though it might be tempting to just say auto, do it itself, not always the best choice. What works more often is the collage option down at the bottom. It kind of just takes all the photos, imagine they're all printed photos, and it kind of just stacks them on top of each other, making it so that they do fit together quite nicely. So I usually hit collage. You'll see all the files are listed here in our little window. Then at the bottom, just make sure it says blend images together. And then you can also click this bottom one, content aware fill transparent areas. That just means that if you've missed any of the little pieces while you're taking the photos, it will fill it in for you. When you're ready, you can just click OK. And then what's going to happen is Photoshop is going to spit out a photo that looks like this. So you can see that we went from a single photo right here to an expanded photo. So it's taken all the information from all those photos and stitched them together so that we have this nice expanded photo. Now you can use this technique in any kind of genre of photography. It doesn't have to be composites. It doesn't have to be conceptual. You can use it for even just a still life photo. This is a nice photo as it is. You can use it for portraits. I've seen it done in weddings, landscapes, food photography. You can use it in pretty much any style of photography, wherever you need to have a little bit of extra space. So if you're out, in the woods and you see a nice scene, but you realize that you can't get all of the stuff in the frame that you want, you can just take a whole bunch of photos and stitch them together. Now you can see on the right, we end up with all the different layers here, and you can see the layer masks that Photoshop has created showing the different parts of each image that it's kept. So it's merged them all together and it's selected different parts of different images to make sure that it fits together nicely. Now, you would need to crop this down and probably resize it because it is quite a large image. It's 10,000 pixels by 13,000 pixels. And the size of that image is going to be quite large because it is 7 photos worth of information. So you might need to go into image size, and then just resize that photo just to make sure that it's not too big of a photo. So that's your first option using Adobe Bridge. Now, the second option is quite similar, but it's just using Photoshop. So maybe you don't have Adobe Bridge, maybe you don't want to use Bridge. That's fine. We can still use Photoshop. We can go up into File, Automate, and then at the bottom, Photo Merge. And that same window, that same kind of pop-up photo merge window will come up here in Photoshop. And we kind of do pretty much the same thing, except that we're going to manually add in those layers instead of selecting them like we did in Bridge. So when the window pops up, you'll see that this little center window is empty. We just go to Browse. You would locate your files, whether they're on a hard drive, on your computer, or on a memory card. When you located them, you're just going to select them all, and the rest is going to be the exact same. So you're just going to hit your collage option here. You're just going to hit content aware field transparent areas, click OK, and you'll end up with the exact same result. So it'll do the exact same thing. It'll spit out this image here and you're good to go. The third option is much more hands-on, takes a little bit more time, but it might be something that's worth learning how to do so that you have a little bit more control. I usually use the photo merge option, I would say 99% of the time, just because it usually works pretty seamlessly. If it doesn't work the first time, and it doesn't work if I switch it to auto or collage, if it doesn't work either of those times, then I end up doing it this way, which is a little bit more time consuming, but it still works just as good. So we're going to start with our center image here, and I'm going to open up Bridge and show you all the photos that I've taken of this little set. So you can see this is our main image that we're using. This is the center image. So imagine that you are creating a grid. So imagine it's like a 3x3 grid. This is the center of our grid. What you want to do is you want to photograph all the different spaces or all the different cells of that grid so that you're getting all the information that you need. So if this is the very center of our grid, we need to create the top right, the bottom right, the bottom left, the left, and the top left, filling in all those empty squares of our grid. When you are doing this, you want to make sure that you're not moving your camera too much. You don't want to change the perspective. You don't want to change the focus. You want to switch your focus to manual, and you really want to just slowly pivot your camera around a central point. So imagine you're locking your entire body, only your wrists are moving, and you're just moving your camera around in a slow circle as you photograph. So you can see that we have that center image, then we have that top square, the top right, the bottom left, and the left. Obviously, I didn't get all of the squares filled, but I've expanded it enough that it works quite well. So essentially, you just want to start with your center image, lock the focus, go into manual focus so that nothing changes, and then you just want to capture as much of the extra background as you need. You can take as much as you want or as little as you want. It's totally up to you. So when you have that image opened up here in Photoshop, what we're going to do is we are going to just give ourselves a bigger canvas to work with. You can do that in two different ways, at least two different ways. You can go up into Image, Canvas Size, and then you can input the new numbers that you want. So you can increase it using pixels or percent or inches, whatever you choose. Or you can just hit the letter C on your keyboard and that will open up your crop tool here in Photoshop. And then you can just manually increase the size of your canvas. I usually go quite large and then I crop it down as I need to because it's easier to work with a bigger area and then crop it down if you need to later. So once you have that image opened, we can start adding in the rest of our images. So all we're going to do is we're going to go to our next image here in our kind of image stack, and there's a couple of different things that we can do to duplicate or copy this over. We can use the Control A, Control C to copy and then paste it in, or we can right click, duplicate layer, and then where it says document, we can just choose our original image and it will just copy that over as a new layer. All we need to do now is we just need to match them up. So we need to treat it like a puzzle. We're going to add them together and match them all up. You might need to lower the opacity of your layer just a little bit so that you can see where they do line up, and they might not line up totally perfectly throughout the entire image, but what you're doing is you're trying to find the spot where they match up as closely as possible. When you're happy with how that looks, you're going to click on your layer mask there at the bottom, that circle with the square around it, and then you're going to use a black soft round brush at 100% opacity, and you're just going to paint away the edges of that new layer so that all that is going to be left is sort of this nice blended together expanded image. So you might need to increase the opacity of that layer back up to 100, and you'll see that we end up matching those images nicely together. Now, one thing that I think is important to do is to make sure that you get rid of any of those harsh lines where that new layer is put on, because you'll notice them if you print the image quite large, or if you look at the image on a large screen, you'll see those little bits of those straight edges. To make sure that you've gotten rid of them, you can always hit the backslash key, which is the one above the enter key on the right hand side of your keyboard. You'll see that this little red guide shows up, and you can see that we've gotten rid of those lines, so we don't have to worry about those. Next, all we're going to do is we're going to go through and just keep adding in the rest of our images. So it takes a little bit of time, but it gives you a little bit more control as well. It gives you more of a hands-on approach, gives you more kind of control over what you're doing here in Photoshop. I'm now doing the Control A, Control C, and Control V. So just copy and pasting this new layer here. And we're just going to do the exact same thing. We're just going to paste this on as a brand new layer. I'm going to turn off that guide. Whoops. And then we are just going to add in our next image. So all we're going to do is we're going to keep adding in the different images that we have, lining them up, and then using our layer mask to get rid of those edges where they meet. So you're just building a puzzle essentially here in Photoshop. We're just using our layer mask to combine the edges, and all you're going to do is you're just going to keep going around making sure that they match. Like I said, there's going to be parts where maybe it doesn't match perfectly, but you're trying to get it to match as closely as you can. You can always use the warp tool if you need to kind of warp things to fit together, but for the most part, you're just going to work at putting them together piece by piece until you end up with an image that looks just like this. So either way, if you use Bridge, if you use Photoshop's Photo Merge tool, or if you do it manually, you'll end up with this nice expanded frame, which gives you a lot more space to work in here in Photoshop. I hope that you enjoyed learning how to create this expanded frame or Brenizer method here in Photoshop, and I can't wait to see how you use it in your own work. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.